Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling, along with Eboni K. Williams and Kat Timpf, and we are the Fox News Specialists. Threats in America, it's getting serious, and lately much of it has been directed against President Trump and the GOP. Earlier this month, newly elected Congresswoman Karen Handel receiving letters containing a suspicious white powder. Now, thankfully, after a thorough FBI investigation, it was announced today that the powder was non-hazardous. That threat may have been neutralized, but the fear is real and worrisome. In fact, the Washington Free Beacon reports today that nearly 30 GOP congressmen have been attacked or threatened since May alone, and now that is downright disturbing. The left-wing media is no better, possibly helping to fuel the threats with comments like this.
It's a sad day when you cannot depend on the president's word. And my advice would just be to Republicans who do cozy up to him. It's just like hugging a suicide bomber. He blows you up in the process with him.
Well, outrageous, but whatever happened to respecting the office of the president, Eboni, even if you didn't vote for the man?
Well, Eric, I don't like any of this nasty, down and ugly stuff that's going on towards President Trump any more than I like some of it that happened to President Obama. I know people kind of cringe when I make the equation, but I think these past two presidents, Eric, it's gone from disagreeing around policy and agenda to just a disrespectful level of despising them as humans.
Now, what do you say, Kat?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at that Free Beacon story, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. Some of those things illustrate what a real horrible threat is. I'm going to kill your wife, and detailing how incredible threats. And then Johnny Depp is, of course, just this really stupid comment, especially for someone who's been accused of being a wife beater. You're going to make jokes about violence. I don't know. Maybe he's got his little neck scarves too tight or something, and he can't.
I predict we get into that a little bit more, too, in this block. But first, let's meet today's specialist. He's a former U.S. Marine reservist, the host of Chasing News on Fox Television, and a former Republican nominee for Congress in the New Jersey's 12th District. And he specializes in making an outstanding pulled pork sandwich. Bill Spadea is here. And she's an attorney, the co-author of the Federalist Society, How Conservatives Took the Law Back from Liberals, and a columnist for New Zealand's biggest newspaper, the Sunday Star Times. And she specializes in U.S. Constitution. No?
No, I do.
Okay, U.S.
I just should have gone with pulled pork sandwich.
You're thinking about the pulled pork. Danielle McLaughlin is here. Danielle, we'll start with you on this U.S. So you're watching this. You're watching all this rhetoric, ratchet up rhetoric. What do you say? What is it? How does it strike you?
Stop. I take Eboni's point really well, which is we have seen in the last probably 12 years, certainly the last 8, this ratcheting up of attacks on people. And it takes me back to Reagan's 11th Amendment, which is talk about the policies, but don't attack the person that's opposing you. And I think today's politicians, and certainly even the media, could learn a little bit from Reagan. Yeah,
and Bill, you're 64,000-foot observation of what's going on.
I think very quickly it's very important to separate what is a stupid comment. Kat, you said it earlier, this whole Johnny Depp thing was almost ridiculous, borderline absurd, versus the real threats, the people that are out there saying, I'm going to cause harm, I'm going to do something. And I think we've got law enforcement and Secret Service, and they know the difference. Yeah.
Eboni, Scott Pelley, he's now recently fired from CBS Evening News, but Scott Pelley at one point called Scalise's shooting a self-inflicted wound.
I was genuinely shocked. As you know, Eric, I used to work over at CBS News and ran into Mr. Pelley many times. And, the Tiffany Network, and I don't want to go too hard at CBS, but it's true. I think there's a standard that in mass media certain places still hold. And for Scott Pelley, the face at the time of the Evening News there, to make that statement, to go so far off the grid in terms of objectivity and compassion and humanity, I was really shocked, literally shocked, and very, very saddened by that.
And Kat, Joy Reid, it comes to mind. Scalise was literally in intensive care, laying in a bed, and Joy Reid commented and tweeted about Scalise's voting record at the time, almost blaming him for being shot. I mean, this is ratcheted up rhetoric. This can't be healthy.
A lot of people did more than just suggest blame. They said, oh, well, there's people saying, oh, well, it should have been worse, or oh, that's what he gets for supporting this or this or this. Of course, that's disgusting. Of course, that's sick. And it says something about our culture that people do feel comfortable making comments like that. And it's, of course, up to social pressure to try to stop those comments because, of course, grouping in all of these things as threats is disingenuous because they're not all legally threats, to your point. Yeah. Some of the things on that list of the Free Beacon were truly disturbing. Voicemails detailing how you're going to kill someone's dog, you're going to kill their wife. That's separate. But again, the rhetoric is a separate issue, but it's bad too. It's an important issue too.
Is
it's
this the environment we're living in, and is it going to continue to get worse?
Seems like it.
Not only that, but it's been going on for a while. You know, there are articles out there. You look at 2010, 2012. There were threats against congressmen and women, and so it's happened before. I think it's now you're hearing it all the time because of social media. But think about it. The Democrats in defense of Obamacare started talking about how the bill, if it was repealed, would cost people lives. So really, that's where it started. Now you're just
I don't know that that's where it started. Obviously, I would argue that it started probably a little bit before that. But here's the point, though, right, Eric? When does it reset? And I'm not saying one person can change everything and wave a magic wand, but I was genuinely hopeful when our friend of the show, Ted Nugent, called in and made a comment to say, you know what, I've actually been a part of this problem, and I want to be a part of the solution. And it seems like no one's really taken that cue, certainly not Johnny Depp.
No, well, no, and I think when you mentioned social media, I think the internet has a lot to do with it. People can hide behind some false identity, and they will just say things that I mean, my brain doesn't even create things like that, so I feel very blessed to not be severely disturbed, but it's just an outlet for all of that.
Twitter courage.
Let me do this, guys. Before we do the Wake Up America, can we listen to Ann Coulter? She weighed in on this pretty provocatively. Listen.
There were so many examples of leftist violence over the years, which has been stepped up massively since Donald Trump came on the scene. But I've just been, sort of stunned after the second Bernie Sanders supporter in the last month to either commit mass murder or attempt to commit mass murder. The response through the media is that, well, Donald Trump, he shares some of the blame. Violence in this country has always come from the political left. I mean, political violence has.
All right, anyone want to weigh in? I mean,
please let me. Yes. Violence in this country has always come from the political left is not a serious comment. And I think also what it does is it, speaking to ratcheting up, it ratchets up the idea that we are somehow against one another. So I think that what Ann Coulter said was extremely, not only not true, but also really irresponsible. She's someone in the public eye. What we should be doing is sitting around like we are around this table, having real discussions in depth, not taking any pot shots at one another, instead of deciding that it's your side or it's my side that's ultimately the problem.
Well, listen, I'm not saying that I agree with what Ann Coulter said, but it certainly does happen to come, a lot of the ratchet up rhetoric happens to come from the political left and people like celebrities that Kat pointed out earlier. So let's talk about this. It's time to wake up, America. Decapitation, brutal multiple stabbings, and now a call for a presidential assassination. The liberal wasteland that is Hollywood has once again topped itself in disgusting and incendiary remarks about President Trump. We highlighted the career-ending decision to air a photo shoot depicting a bloody, decapitated head of the president. When 11-year-old Barron Trump saw it, he ran to his mom asking, "Mom, is Daddy dead?" "No, Barron, your dad's not dead, but Kathy Griffin's career likely is." Then the fools in Shakespeare in the Park with their assassination of the president by 100 cuts with 100 blades, as they called it. The actors went overboard with a bloodbath that became too violent and too political. The play lost major sponsors. Delta Airlines and Bank of America both pulled out. And yesterday, another liberal celebrity incapable of regulating his mouth went there suggesting a presidential assassination is in order.
Can we bring Trump here? I think he needs help. When was the last time an actor assassinated a president? I want to clarify, I'm not an actor. I lie for a living. However, it's been a while. And maybe it's time.
Maybe it's time? Depp, you damn fool. You think you can say these things without repercussions? You're crazier than you appear, because America is still generally populated by normal people, law-abiding, God-fearing, regular people, and maybe Americans will show their distaste for your comments by steering clear of your movies. But here's some free advice to Johnny Depp. Johnny, rather than pretending to know a damn ounce about politics, stick to the movie scripts, or maybe take on a role of a guy who came from nothing, made $500 million playing a make-believe pirate on the big screen, and then he blows all his money, gets arrested for trashing hotel rooms, abuses drugs and alcohol to the point of being accused of abusing his beautiful young wife, played by Amber Heard. Anyway, this guy ends up burned out, wasted fool of a man. Wait, that's not a movie role. That's your life.
Can I say this,
Yeah,
Eric,
please
real
jump
quick?
in.
You point out something in your monologue about most Americans still being God-fearing, normal people. I had a caller today who said very plainly that he was going to go see the Pirates of the Caribbean movie this weekend, and he changed his mind. Now he's going to go see Cars instead. So I think for those that really, and I thought you said that beautifully, Danielle, earlier, and those that really feel this way, whether you like Trump, you don't, or Obama, it's not about that. It's about elevating as human beings in this society and say, we're not going to go here anymore, and that's how they can fiscally show their distaste for this.
Kat, I want to point out that Johnny Depp apologized for his words earlier, but that apology may have been because he's getting a lot of backlash for what he said.
Right, absolutely. He didn't feel so bad about it when everyone was cheering and laughing, and he felt cool about himself for the first time in a long time. He's just become a shriveled little pile of walking hippie scarves with a hat attached to it. But again, I don't think that, right, I mean, he's a pathetic drunk. He's accused of abusing his wife. He doesn't have any money, and he's going to get up there and be like, yeah, president, yeah, my hat. Like, cool, bro. What are you doing? Get over it. But again, I don't think it's fair to call it a call to assassinate the president. I don't think anybody was going to watch that and thought he was being serious. Again, though, given what we've been seeing, incredibly irresponsible. I wouldn't say illegal, but I would say irresponsible and just really gross.
I almost expect celebrities to be this moronic and say things like that, except for those last three words, Danielle, maybe it's time. And that made the difference for me with Johnny Depp.
Yeah, this is indefensible. I mean, it's completely and utterly indefensible, whether it's Johnny Depp talking about President Trump or somebody else talking about President Obama. Like, none of this is okay. And as the liberal on the panel, I'm not going to stand here, or sit here, I should say, and defend people who've come out.
No, I've been laughing. The liberal on the panel.
Self-professed.
Self-professed.
What's worse, what he said, or the fact that the crowd cheered?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a little bit unsettling.
Well, that was in England. I mean,
It was
fair.
Glastonbury.
He was across the pond.
But still, to your point, you said, people have to keep each other in check on social media and et cetera, and that's not keeping anyone in check if a crowd reacts, no matter how much they've had to drink. That's just not.
Well, let's talk about the business end of this, Eboni, for a second. Delta and the Bank of America pull out of sponsorship of Shakespeare in the Park because they were responding because half of America doesn't agree with that tone.
Absolutely. I think even more than half of America doesn't agree with that tone, Eric.
That's a good point.
You know what I'm saying?
Very fair
even
point.
people that don't support President Trump politically still don't like that mess. And look, that's what I'm saying. I think it's only a matter of time before we have to hear from Disney around this issue with Johnny Depp, honestly, because people are not going to be satisfied with this statement by him.
Maybe
Great job dealing with your money issue, bro.
Yeah.
Great job making that comment when you're already struggling.
Right, he can afford to lose another job.
Kat is pointing out that Johnny Depp, it's estimated that he made $650 million making movies in the last 13 years, and now may be dead broke.
He's having some financial problems, and he's just deciding to work really hard, it seems, to come out of that hole.
Not.
Yeah.
Can I ask a nerdy question to you, Danielle, about the constitutional issue? We know free speech is protected up until a point, and normally that point is the incitement of violence. So when Eric points out this final line of maybe it's time, for you in your legal analysis, do you think that's encroaching upon that incitement space, or is it far away from it?
We're approaching, I think, certainly. And to your point, Eboni, there was a case, I think, this week in the Supreme Court that said that hate speech is actually constitutionally allowed. So our First Amendment rights are very, very broad. It's our first freedom, right? I don't think I think it's on the way. Right? I think it's on the way. The idea, you can't call fire in a theatre. You can't incite someone to actual violence, right? I don't think we're there, but I think that the way that these conversations are heating up, we're going to get there. So I think it's up to leaders, particularly of both sides, of both stripes, and I think it's also for people who sit in desks in front of cameras to model the kind of behaviour that we feel like we should be seeing. I call it my 2-year-old role. I have a 2.5-year-old. What would I teach her about how to engage with someone, how to share an idea, how to sort of work, how to be in the world? That's how would I do that?
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to leave it right there. Next up, repeal and replace. President Trump and the GOP are on a mission, but will they succeed in coming up with a better health care plan than Obamacare? And later, a despicable denial from North Korea after the death of 22-year-old student Otto Warmbier. Stick around.
Senate Republicans' health care bill immediately on shaky ground after its release just yesterday. And already more than half a dozen GOP lawmakers already signaling concerns with the bill.
We think that the idea that we're going to allow the death spiral of Obamacare to continue, but we're going to subsidize it, is just not a very Republican notion.
We can get this done. We can get to yes, but the key to getting it done, to getting to yes, is we need common sense reforms that lower the cost of premiums so that health insurance is more affordable for families who are struggling.
And just a short time ago, Nevada Senator Dean Heller announced that he also would be withholding support of the bill in its current form, making him now the 5th GOP lawmaker to oppose it. Meanwhile, President Trump says that he greatly supports the Senate bill, and although it might need a little bit of negotiation. Okay, so Bill, I want to come to you on this, to use Senator Cruz's words, getting to yes. Do you think it's realistic in the really short time frame that they have if this thing goes to vote next week?
A couple things. Yes, they can get to yes, because right now they're just all posturing politically. Everybody wants to get a little bit, and I think the challenge is mainly in the conservatives. I mean, Rand Paul as more of a libertarian conservative and Ted Cruz to the right of everybody, they're looking for perfection, and they're missing two key elements of this bill that it's surprising that they forget that they're in Washington, and part of it is a little bit of compromise. You've got a $590 billion tax cut over 10 years in this bill, and all the while they keep Obamacare in place, premiums continue to go up. So as conservatives, I can't imagine why they're not on board.
I can't imagine conservatives being on board with a bill that takes your tax dollars to pay insurance companies. That's not small government. That's a disaster. That's the same kind of thing that conservatives were screaming and yelling about, how that's illegal and how can we do something like that. I mean, there is a such thing as compromise, right? But I completely understand how something like that is not something you can compromise on.
But what about the pushback to the states? I mean, to me, I see it as they're saying, look, let's let the states do their own Medicaid expansion. And that, and that to me is one of the most important tenets of this bill, that this is going to push it back to the states and let the states take up their cost and let the governors and the legislatures do their job of prioritizing their spending.
Okay, Eric, let me ask you this. Somewhere between, Bill, I have to say, to me, it sounds a little optimistic to think they're not that far apart from yes. That's just my take. But, Eric, to Kat's point, nobody wants to be a purist. You can't afford to be a purist on the issue. But we also can't just afford something that looks a whole lot like Obamacare and really doesn't bring down premiums. So
something as important as health care, and this is 1/6 or 1/7 of the economy, depending on who you talk to. There are two areas. There's policy and politics. Under policy, I'm going to disagree with you 100%, Bill. I think this is terrible policy. I'm going to agree with Kat in that it doesn't address the most important part of the healthcare problem, and it's the cost of healthcare. Not health insurance, but the cost of healthcare. You have to drive the underlying commodity costs down. You have to in order for it to work. And Kat's right. All this bill does is takes taxpayer dollars, throw it at people and say, look, it's going to cost you a little bit less. It's not. It's costing taxpayers a lot more. The politics of it, very quickly, the politics of it, it lets the Democrats off the hook, Eboni. The Democrats were on the hook for an awful health care bill. Everyone hated Obamacare. There's like 10% of the population that thinks this was a good idea. And now what they've done is they've transferred that hate from the Democrats onto the GOP. Right. It's insanity.
Well, I agree. And Danielle, I want to get you in here, but that is certainly the argument that many Dems were hoping that this would be the scenario, right? That, you guys sat and you asked and you begged and you pleaded to have your hand at health care, and here you go.
Right, here you go, and there are 23 million people likely to be without insurance over the next, 6 to 10 years. In defense of Obamacare, I will say that it did, to your point, Eric, try to increase efficiencies within the marketplace. And we have the highest healthcare costs per capita in the world. So there are some real problems, and I think part of that is the fact that we have insurers as middlemen between people who give the care and people who receive the care. But
you can't say Obamacare addressed any health care costs. It didn't.
What it tried to do was work towards results-based care so that doctors and healthcare providers would be incentivized to not run 100 tests, which is just pointless, but to get results.
Can I push back on that, Danielle? I think that maybe it was the stated goal. I think what we saw were, there's more coverage, half of that being from basically an entitlement program, and the other half being from people that many of them didn't want to buy the coverage, but they had a mandate. So didn't get to its goals. But I think what's a fair critique, though, Eric, is then where is the GOP with something better?
Worse.
Right.
They're not. They're not. And you make a very good point. It was an entitlement program under the Obamacare bill law. And what the GOP did was made it a bigger entitlement program.
Yeah, it's an entitlement program, including an entitlement program for insurance companies, which, by the way, they're doing just fine on their own.
It's been that from go. And I think the challenge here is that the same people that are the drivers of this, you're right, they're not addressing costs, but let's face it, a lot of the same naysayers were fighting against prescription drugs coming in from Canada, which we know would lower costs. You know, the whole issue of lowering those state barriers to allow competition. I mean, all of those are good things, but none of those things can be excluded. Absolutely put them in the bill. But why does it have to be a catch-all? To me, I think the most important thing right now is
got to get rid of Obamacare. Right here is cost, and all you're doing, as Kat aptly points out, you're masking the symptom. You're really masking.
Band-aid. Band-aid.
Yeah,
and it's going to fall apart, and then we're going to have single payer.
Yeah, we are going to do that.
You drive costs. You drive health insurance costs down by reducing the barriers to sell across state lines. But you drive the cost of health care down by publishing what every hospital and doctor publishes what they charge for a procedure or for a medication, and that'll embarrass them and competitivize them into driving costs down.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The challenge is if you don't get rid of Obamacare at this juncture, costs are going to continue to rise.
I hear too much of that, though. That's the way they're going to get Republicans to vote for this, by saying, oh, if you don't vote for this, you're going to keep Obamacare.
That's political. That's a political, purely political argument.
But this is Washington, and it is politics, and you're never going to get the perfect bill. So you've got to negotiate. But that's a challenge with Ted Cruz and with Rand Paul. You've got the ideologues versus the politicians.
Calling this not perfect, like just not perfect, is so disingenuous. It's like calling just a hurricane, like, that's kind of rainy outside. This is bad. It's a really, really bad bill. And if you don't want government involvement in health care, you don't want this, because it's going to fall apart, and then we'll wind up with single payer.
And if you want to
have a little bit of government involvement because of people that cannot afford to take care of themselves.
And even if you're not opposed to the government involvement part, though, Bill, but if you want just affordable premiums, this doesn't get us closer to that either, though. But much to discuss, and we will not end this here. When we come back, North Korea denies U.S. student Otto Warmbier was tortured, but we know better. We'll break this down in the disturbing situation it's led to. We'll be right back.
Most girls are smart and strong and beautiful. Most girls work hard, go far, we are unstoppable. Most girls are fight to make every day. No two are the same. I want to be like.
North Korea now denying it had anything to do with the death of American student Otto Warmbier. Its first public statement since the 22-year-old's death, North Korea dismissed claims of torture as groundless. The rogue state even took it one step further, insisting Warmbier return to the U.S. in a, quote, normal state of health. And as if it could get any crazier, North Korea is actually claiming they are the biggest victim of this horrible tragedy. You've got to be kidding me. Right, of course. And then, like we might talk about later, Dennis Rodman saying that people just don't realize what's good about North Korea. And it's good that they're modernized over there.
Like 200,000 people in prison camps, is that what's good about North Korea?
Right, the things that they're modernizing are nukes that they want to blow us all away with. Great job. Now, this is obviously disgusting, but this is the official story in North Korea. This is what all the people over there believe.
Right.
So how do you deal with something like that?
Here's how you do it. You take that, them saying that they sent Warmbier back normal, and realizing that, and they blamed botulism at one point, but then he was always going to be normal, and he dies the following week. You take that and apply to everything they ever say and do, including with testing their ballistic missiles. They just tested a rocket. They're talking about testing a nuke under the ground that could blow away Los Angeles, the west coast of the United States. And you apply that same logic, and again, I'll say it again, I'm called a warmonger out there right now. The guy who hates getting involved in foreign wars that we don't have anything to do with. I'm the warmonger, but I think there's a way to, not nuclear, but a way to disassemble their nuclear ambitions quietly and effectively with a big-ass bomb right over there.
Well, there would be big-ass consequences for that big-ass bomb, though.
Well, look.
There might be
absolutely, that would kill, end up with dead Americans. You have to really avoid military, taking a military action.
I mean, we can avoid that, Kat, but we also, look, I think it's bogus that you're called a warmonger, Eric, because you don't want to bury your head in the sand around an issue that we know is growing increasingly imminent day by day. We know that. Why? Because they're literally telling us that. I want to touch on this young man's death, though, very quickly, and I think that it's not enough that this family, those parents, lost their young 22-year-old son. Now they have to deal with the added salt in wound of the fact that this regime is not only denying its responsibility, but essentially further blaming his death on him. You talk about self-inflicted, Eric. I mean, I can't imagine being a parent and having to wake up to this type of statement from North Korea. Not that we expected better of them, because it is North Korea, but my God, I just can't imagine it.
I can imagine. Are you surprised? I mean, these are not good people. There are zero indications that these are good people can do anything but the most monstrous, disgusting thing that they will possibly do.
Let me take that example, your example. They're not good people, and they may do something crazy. Who's to say they wouldn't do it anyway? Launch something at that DMZ where we have 30,000 troops, or the west coast of California.
The question is, what do you do? I mean, you've got 28,000 American troops there, and I think, you know, if we're really looking at, I would say that thankfully you've got a president who is not afraid, or at least doesn't come off as afraid, to say what's on his mind, be tough, and act. And I think in that sense, I don't know what the solution is. Is it worth a military conflict where a student dies? It may be, if you're talking about the bigger picture, Eric, as you were. You're talking about a country that you can't trust.
Increased ambitions. We pointed out that in 2009, at the very beginning of the President Obama administration, the first nuclear bomb they tested was 2 megatons. Yeah. And the last one, 7 years later, was 10 megatons. And who knows what they're willing to do.
There's no denying this is bad, but what is a good way to handle it is a really hard question.
I totally agree. I think we also have to look at the role of China in all of this. I think, frankly, China likes the idea that there is a communist country on its Pacific border, separating it from Japan. You know, China gave nuclear technology to North Korea, along with the Pakistanis and the Russians. So they have been sending also parts for missiles. They're helping the North Koreans build these bombs and missiles. So I think there's a big political question for the president. What do you do about that?
Kat, I have a quick question for you, and because I'm just genuinely curious, and I respect your apprehension to go forward with a military answer, but are you essentially banking on them just not going to that next level, them being North Korea?
Of course I'm not.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not. I'm just saying that you can't look at it as, okay, we have military action, we just take it out and nothing's going to happen. They have things hidden underground over there. They do have people on the ground they wouldn't be afraid to use and employ. We have Americans there. There's South Korea there. There would be consequences. And then around the world might be kind of mad at us for that also, for sparking that. I'm not denying it either. Right. I'm not saying, I'm just saying acknowledge that. And if you did do something.
If he does something first shot, right? If he does, and we just,
I mean, I think one thing that we should be,
how crazy of a regime
one thing we should be doing is we should be doing all we can to build up our missile defense systems, because clearly those are not up to par. That we should be putting way more energy into that right now.
And how many Americans have to die before we do act? But if we're going to act, you go big or you go home. Yeah. You act, and you act swiftly, and you don't worry about world opinion. Die
if he does launch an intercontinental nuclear missile that hits the west coast of Florida? Of California. How many?
And when I say countries being mad at us, I'm not worried about hurting their feelings. I'm worried about Americans getting killed over it. Just to be clear, to clarify to everybody, I don't care about hurting the feelings of evil dictators. All right, coming up. President Trump believes the special counsel into the Russia investigation, Mr. Robert Mueller, may have too much of a friendship with James Comey for it to be a true investigation. Right back with that.
Welcome back to the Fox News Specialist. Our specialists today are Bill Spadea and Danielle McLaughlin. Let's continue the conversation. So President Trump is questioning just how independent Special Counsel Robert Mueller truly is. On Fox and Friends this morning, he said this.
Well, he's very, very good friends with Comey, which is very bothersome. But he's also, we're going to have to see. I mean, we're going to have to see in terms, look, there has been no obstruction. There has been no collusion. There has been leaking by Comey, but there's been no collusion, no obstruction, and virtually everybody agrees to that.
Okay, Bill Spadea, I want to ask you this about what the president just said there. Now, I understand. Obviously, when we go back to the Comey testimony, he was lobbing up high fives to Robert Mueller the whole time. I could see a little concern. I'd be concerned, too, if I was President Trump. Don't tell anybody. Okay. But this is my question, though.
It's our secret.
How do people that, before any of this gets politicized, they enjoy reputations of objectivity and professionalism that are beyond reproach? Everybody in Washington said Robert Mueller is as stand-up as they come. To my knowledge, he is the only FBI director to be asked to stay an extended period of time beyond the 10-year appointment, and even now coming back in this capacity. Yet somehow, some way, it seems like when Jim Comey comes into the picture, everybody now becomes too biased to be trusted.
Well, it seems that everybody has their own political agenda going in. I mean, Comey was very popular until he wasn't, and then the Democrats loved him until they didn't, and then the Republicans loved him until they didn't. I think everybody's bringing their agenda to the table. The truth is the president will benefit from these guys if what he is saying is true, and I believe it is, that there was no collusion, that all this stuff is just hype, because when it's the other side, if you can paint the picture and say, look, these are all Hillary supporters, they've got it in for me, if it's those guys that exonerate him,
all the better.
Smooth sailing to re-election. In
I feel like Eric Bolling might feel differently.
So this is really blows me away. So we have 7 investigations going on. We have a special counsel, Robert Mueller, that you point out. We have no evidence of collusion, no evidence of obstruction of justice yet. Yet? Good job. Right? We did that at the same time. However, you know what we found out today, and I think this is amazing. This is the fallout of being wanting investigations too aggressively. On the Democrat side, the Senate Judiciary Committee today announced that they're going into a probe into Loretta Lynch because apparently there was a hacked batch of emails, documents, that said, one of them read that Democratic operative who expressed confidence that Mrs. Lynch would keep the Clinton investigation from going too far, and that there was emails going back and forth between the DNC, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the Department of Justice. Think about that. That is the very definition of collusion.
That's good, by the way, Danielle.
And it's Democrats.
In my opinion, I think that's good that AG Lynch is being looked at, because I think we learned things about her that are not favorable.
I think we need to be careful, though, because that is one of the pieces of intelligence that are rumored or potentially planted by Russia. So the idea that this would somehow upset the apple cart and sort of besmirch the reputation of the then Attorney General. I want to go back to Comey and Mueller, because I think
Daniel, are you accusing this email to be a Russian-planted email?
There is some reporting around the idea that alleged email where it's a connection between the Attorney General and the Clinton
Post
campaign.
and the New York Times who are reporting these.
It was one of the things that
Thought the New York
relied
Times
on.
was garbage, Eric.
Listen, I don't necessarily trust them, but I'm saying if I would think that they would, you know, especially being Democrats that they're looking at and alleged investigations. Wow. Okay. All right.
Back to Comey. We can talk about that afterwards over a glass of wine or something. Comey and Mueller are part of the intelligence and the investigatory institutions of this country. And I think what the president is doing is problematic. It's what he has done with the press, which is to undermine them so that the only speaker of truth is him. And so what he's doing with Mueller and what he's done with Comey, you know how they really got to know one another? They got to know one another at John Ashcroft's bedside during the Bush administration, when they stood up and offered their own resignations when they would not allow additional NSA, basically additional NSA, eavesdropping to continue. So they stood up and said, this is wrong, this is unconstitutional, this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, you can have our resignations.
What about when President Obama defended Hillary Clinton? I mean, you really have the same thing, that there is precedent for presidents standing up and saying, look, this is what I believe.
Sure,
and I don't see what the problem with that would be. Anybody who was under investigation should be allowed to say.
Right.
Look,
regardless of whether he's being fair or not, if he recuses himself, real bad for Trump. It'd be way worse for Trump than any bias that he might have had in favor of Comey. That's just absolutely true. You'd start hearing, you thought you heard the I word a lot last time around. You would literally hear nothing but the I word from the moment you woke up to the moment you went to sleep if that happened. But that's just true, Eric.
Doesn't it strike you as odd that with all the things that have been leaked and talked about and accusations, and he did this and they did this and there was emails, not one of these things has the subject line Trump colluded or Trump obstructed justice. Not one of them.
That changes nothing about what I just said.
I'm not responding to what you said. I simply pose the question, does it not strike you as odd, with all the information that's been leaked, all the investigations that have been leaked, all the accusations of everyone around Trump have been leaked, not one of these leaks or one of these accusations actually has Trump colluding or obstructing justice?
Can I tell you this, Eric? I actually have become, I can see an outcome where he's vindicated, where ultimately there is no there. But ultimately, I think Robert Mueller really needs to make that call at this point for it to be put to bed, and for that cloud that we keep hearing about to really be removed.
Yeah, Eric, whether, you know, absolutely, there is no evidence of it at this point, but that won't matter. This will become the evidence if he recuses himself. People will see it as evidence.
The smoke will bring it down more than the fire.
I mean, it's not in a legal sense. I don't mean evidence in a legal sense. Let me just make that clear. But in the eyes of the public.
I wholeheartedly respect your opinions that we need more investigation. That's your opinion. But here's what happens. When this is going on, 7 investigations, including a special counsel, D.C. shuts down. They can't do anything. They can't say anything. They can't talk to other people without a lawyer present, without 3 people present. This is a real drain on resources, and they are limited in D.C. of the Trump administration.
Final words from Eric Bolling coming up. Friday just wouldn't be the same without Cat on the Street, and you won't believe what my co-host has uncovered out on Coney Island. The Fox News specialist will be right back.
Time for Cat on the Street. Coney Island is a hotbed for mermaids. Yeah, seriously. I headed to its mermaid parade this past weekend and asked for the mermaid community to enlighten me on what they know about current events, like the Russia investigation. And do you know what? I think I cracked the case. Tough political climate right now, and a lot of people don't really seem to know what to do about it. So I came to the mermaid parade to see if mermaids know what to do about it. What do mermaids think about the Russia investigation?
Well, we feel like Russians can't really be trusted. I was married to one.
Russia investigation, do you think it's true? Do you know anything we don't know?
No, not today. Today is all about the mermaid parade.
Are you a mermaid?
Yes, well, I'm a jellyfish, technically.
There's all this investigation going on with the Russia stuff. Do mermaids have any insider information on that?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Ooh. What's the most important thing in the world to you as a mermaid?
To have fun and stay in water.
Have fun and stay in water. You heard it here first, folks. Why do you think the FBI hasn't interviewed any mermaids about this issue yet?
You know, I think they're scared to uncover some scary truths.
I think it's very scaly. It's a very scaly situation right now.
I'm going to tell the FBI director he can use this.
It won't be the first time.
Do mermaids know things we don't?
I think that today is a day that nobody's a liberal, nobody's a right wing, nobody's anything. Today you're a mermaid.
I'm trying to give mermaids a voice on the important political issues of our time. I think that, you know, with all the mystery of the sea, you might know some things that we don't know.
They did it.
Wow. So everybody's been looking for evidence, and you just had to ask a mermaid the whole time. Do you think that politicians should be listening to mermaids a little bit more?
Absolutely, because we represent here, and they should represent like what's happening in the world and stay in the Paris Accord.
As a mermaid, I think what happens in the sea applies to the land. You shouldn't be willing to take fake news as real news just because it's easier and it doesn't require as much attention.
Is there fake news in the sea?
Yeah, a lot of fake news.
Do you think that maybe we need some mermaids in Washington, D.C.?
I think we need mermaids everywhere.
Trump needs like a mermaid advisor.
100%.
You should call your congressman.
If you don't like something, swim away.
Yeah, swim away. You know that there's no mermaids at all in Congress. Do you think that's unfair?
There's no mermaid in Congress?
Not a one.
Not a mermaid in Congress?
Not a one.
That is shocking.
Do you think Washington, D.C. would operate better if more people were mermaids?
Yeah.
We've never had a mermaid president. What do you think about that?
It sounds like a good idea.
I'm all about individual liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be a mermaid.
Yeah, maybe you should be a mermaid. Maybe everybody should be a mermaid.
Maybe they should. Happy Mermaid-versary. I'm glad I could be part of this moment.
Me too.
See?
You know, it was very lucky. Very
amazing.
lucky. That was a festival? Was that
Yeah, it was a parade.
Did they plan it so that it was rainy that day so that the mermaids wouldn't dry out?
Yeah, it's all real. It's all real. I'm not afraid to get on the ground and, you know, find some answers to some of the questions.
I think we should have gone to them much earlier. Think about the first segment we talked about how we talk to each other in a way that is, we're not ratcheting up the you-know-what. put a mermaid costume on.
All just established.
Diffused it.
Oh, they weren't just putting a costume on. They were they were
It's a
establishing their identity as mermaids.
They were method acting.
Yeah, not one of them. They would have been very upset if I didn't treat them as mermaids.
I'm sure.
Except
I'm sure
for
they
the
did a beautiful thing.
Was she a jellyfish?
She was a jellyfish mermaid, and she
Okay.
clarified she was in fact a jellyfish mermaid.
Okay.
So.
Which bathroom do
Yeah,
they
you know,
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Don't go
They're
there.
identifying. It depends. It's up
I
to them.
honestly think the two little mermaids were the only two that should have been mermaids of the whole place.
We're all mermaids.
Oh, Eric.
We're all mermaids sometimes, Eric. All right. I don't even know what that means. Next, we circle back with our specialists, Bill Spadea and Danielle McLaughlin. We'll be right back.
All right, we're going to circle back with our specialists, Bill Spadea and Danielle McLaughlin. Bill, I'm going to just go to you first. Jerry Burke.
Burke,
producer of old show of mine. Jason Rosenberg and Paul Porowski, producers for your show.
I will tell them
like
to
a
say,
shout-out.
you know what? They're doing great. Chasing's doing great. More than 1,000 episodes.
There you go. There you go.
Bill, my question's for you also. What is the worst job you've ever seen someone do pronouncing your last name?
Wow, I don't know. I think we have a tie here today.
Okay.
It's all good. It's all good.
Why don't you do it for us? Let's go. Give us some of the proper.
All right, Spadea.
Spadea. That was so fluid.
Quick, Danielle, a constitutional law expert here. Were you Miss Moot Court like I was? Were you a Moot Court person?
I was a moot court person.
I knew you were.
There's nothing wrong with being a nerd, right?
That's right. That's right. I see. I just had an instinctual
I
was too.
I just feel your last name.
Can you tell us what moot court is?
You gotta Google it, Bolling.
I did that. It's like mock trial, right?
So it's like appellate mock trial work in law school, and only the biggest legal geeks in all of law school actually compete to be on it.
I did mock trial. I just didn't become a lawyer.
No.
So
It was probably for the best.
Yeah, recreational lawyering in my time.
That's the best way to do it,
Guess
honestly.
what we did? We finished 6 weeks on this show. 7 weeks coming up next week. Thank you to all our, first of all, our Fox News specialists today, Bill Spadea and Danielle McLaughlin. And we thank all of you for watching. Make sure to follow us on social media, Specialist FNC on Twitter, Facebook. Remember, 5 o'clock will never be the same. Special report up next.
President Trump tells Fox News he's bothered by the special counsel's friendship with the man Mr. Trump fired as FBI director, and that tweet about taped conversations was meant to keep James Comey honest. This is Special Report.